have you with us. Welcome, Cassidy. Please, Dr. Reem, let me hand you the floor.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm sorry about this technical glitch. I am still very technically challenged. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm glad you joined us. I have a special guest with me today to start our new series for the year 2021. Thank you, Cassidy, for joining me here. I'm going to turn the table around and let you present yourself, first of all, and tell the story of how we met.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I just want to, of course, thank you, Dr. Reem. Thank you, Emma, Kat, and the team at the Zay Initiative for inviting me here today. This is truly an honor, and I'm very excited. Thank you for everyone around the world who's joining us today. I'm Cassidy. I am a fashion historian. I am also a PhD student at the University of New Mexico in the United States. And as Emma mentioned, I am the co-host and creator of Dressed: The History of Fashion, the iHeartRadio podcast twice weekly. And Dr. Reem and I met thanks to Dr. Colleen Darnell, who put us in touch. Dr. Reem was a guest on the podcast last season. And since then, I have just been continuously inspired by the work of Dr. Reem and her team at the Zay Initiative. This wonderful organization, not only do they promote and celebrate the art, history, and cultural significance of Arab dress and fashion, but I'm also so inspired by their work to empower Arab women, and then their encouragement and fostering of these cross-cultural dialogues and relationships. So the latter is, of course, evidenced by this conversation today and today's webinar, but also I just have to say the incredible amount of work that they put into their website and each and every post on their social media accounts, all of which are produced in both English and Arabic. And this is an incredible amount of work, as I'm sure you can imagine, and really speaks to the organization's dedication to encouraging cross-cultural exchange and conversation. And I think the Zay's mission is especially significant to Euro-American audiences. And I know a lot of the audience here today comes from within the world of fashion and dress studies, like myself. And so many of us are familiar with fashion within and fashion collections and histories within Europe and America, but also that center Euro-American dress. And the Zay Initiative really encourages us to expand the very definition of what fashion is, and encourages us to include a worldview of fashion beyond those narrow Euro-American confines. So in one form or another, every culture around the world throughout history has dressed and adorned their bodies. It is one of our most basic human instincts and one of our most intimate shared acts of self and cultural expressions. And in so many ways, dress is a conduit to our shared humanity. And the Zay has done an incredible job of promoting and celebrating that. As you will see, this will become increasingly evident throughout the presentation today. So without further ado, Dr. Reem, please introduce us to your wonderful organization, the Zay Initiative.
Thank you for this introductory, Cassidy. It's really a pleasure. And when I hear you speaking about it and you are telling the story, I am myself amazed because I never think that we've been doing all of this. So thank you very much for putting it forward. And but I wanted to ask one thing. You remember we met before a long time ago. We worked together on something that you were asking about, Arab dress, I think. Didn't we do that
That's right. Years ago, when you published your book, which we're going to discuss in a couple of slides, we had been talking through probably my Art of Dress blog, which has since become my Instagram. But yeah, we kind of met then, and then Dr. Colleen Darnell put us back in touch.
That's so true. And it's amazing how this platform has managed to bring me closer to so many people that I met throughout time and in a way past lives, and brought them back to the to a connection through this social media and through this
right.
web life that we are living through. I wanted to start first, for the sake of the audience that we've got today, and introduce the meaning of the name of Zay. Zay in Arabic is a term that simply means the culture and general attire of certain country or era. And why are we using the Zay as a name, and why the Arabic language? Because the Zay Initiative is focused on the Arab world and the legacy of the Arab world. What do we mean by the Arab world when we say the Arab world? An Arab is very much like an American, is a cultural trait rather than racial one. The Arab world is full of rich and diverse countries, ethnicities, religions, groups, cultures, including Muslims, Christians, Jews, Yazidis, and other minorities. Differences exist not only among countries, but within countries themselves. There are 200 million Arabs worldwide. Generally, anyone who adopts the Arabic language is typically called an Arab. And I thought this was just a nice way to introduce you and your audience to what is the Arab world about. And here you can see on the slide the countries that are considered part of the Arab League. Now, the Zay Initiative itself, our motto is an ode to the past and nod to the future. It's a collection of Arab dress and adornment that celebrate human narratives. Simply put, we at the Zay Initiative collect the tangible and narrate the intangible. We collect artifacts to help record stories of those who used them or wore them, and tell their stories through the medium of these beautiful objects. How do we do that? We have 5 main pillars, and you are familiar with them, Cassidy, as you know. We collect, document, conserve Arab dress and adornment. We present this collection and contextualize it through a digital archive and a blog. We encourage intercultural dialogue in order to highlight our shared humanity. We inspire and educate designers to aid in creating for a sustainable future. And we empower women regionally and globally by bringing their untold stories to life. Through beautiful imagery and through beautiful artifacts that we collect. Now, the Zay Initiative of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. The Zay Initiative is proud to particularly be aligned with 4 of these SDGs. And how do we fulfill it? I'm going to go through this presentation to show you how we connect to all of these as we go along. The Zay Initiative is focused on growing a traditional dress collection with examples from across the Arab world, alongside relevant pieces from Iran, India, China, Ottoman Turkey, and elsewhere as far as Japan. And yes, there are relations between the Japanese kimono, oddly enough, and the Arab thobe. And we discovered it through our research and through our documentation and collection, which is very interesting and shows how humans have communicated and exchanged cultures throughout time and space. This is an excellent example. It is Dr. Reem El Zahawi. She's a lady that came from Iraq. Dr. Zahawi was born in 1920 and was one of the first handful of Iraqi women, the first class of women doctors to graduate from the Royal College of Medicine in Baghdad in 1943. One would wonder whether Arab women studied at medical school at that time. And they did. After her training at the Royal Teaching Hospital and the Children's Hospital in Baghdad, she traveled to the USA in 1947 to complete her graduate studies. She trained in pediatrics in Los Angeles, San Francisco, as well as Boston. And in 1950, Dr. Zahawi passed the California State Board test, becoming the first Iraqi woman to be licensed to practice medicine in that state. She specialized in pediatric allergy and practiced at her clinic in Orange, California. In 1950, Dr. Zahawi requested a Hashmi from her family back in Iraq, who bought it from Basra. And at that time, Basra in Iraq was a center for production of this kind of dress. And it was sent to her to America. It was of the highest quality made at that time. And you see the example on the, I think it's the right side of the slide, on the mannequin. Luckily, we have this piece as part of the collection. Dr. Zahawi passed away a few years ago, and her son donated this piece in her memory, which is a wonderful thing because it tells you the story of these women through an article of clothing. And what is more interesting is the fact that in 1960, a New York-based artist, John Koch, created an oil portrait recording this esteemed woman wearing a similar hashmi. Her family thought that she was wearing the same hashmi, but when it was sent to me and we looked into it, we realized that the decorative work varies. Especially if you look carefully at the neckline and the gusset that she's holding in her arm. They differ in design and motif to the one that we have. So she must have had another piece that she had worn for that sitting. But what is interesting in the image is that she is wearing it with a typical dress and the gold necklace, which is called a gardana. That's an Egyptian type of necklace that used to be very popularly worn with this type of dress. And she's wearing a very, very, very thick gold belt around her waist. It's a waisted dress. And this is part of the way women dressed, the alluring way that women dressed, because they layered their clothing and their jewelry to entice a form of, how can I say, suspense and attraction, to attract attention. So it's wonderful that we would be able to see an image of a woman wearing this piece and understand how this dress is being worn. Or understand how the dress is draped when you see it on a mannequin like this.
And that's what I absolutely love about the Zay and all of the work that you've done, Dr. Reem, in that it's about the garments. It's just as much about the garments as it is about the women who wore them. And you have these incredible stories that come with each and every piece in your collection. And we're going to learn a lot more about different pieces as we go throughout the presentation today. But we're also going to learn about the other ways you've promoted the collection. For instance, you have this book, the Sultani book, which is a two-parter. It's incredibly beautiful. Can you take us through a couple of the other ways? You have the book collection, and then the other ways you've promoted the collection, such as exhibitions, publications, designer collaborations.
Yes, we'll go through all of this, and I hope we won't bore the audience. I hope they are enjoying it. Please write in the chat so that the team will tell me if I am staying too long at one point or the other. But it's a passionate subject to me, and I love to talk about it, and I can go on forever. Publication-wise, yes, this was a doorstopper. It's a book that we produced. It took me 8 years to produce it because, as you saw it, I sent you a copy, Cassidy. I know you are in, by the way, we didn't tell the audience, you are in Albuquerque, correct?
Yes.
At the moment, and I am in Dubai. So we are worlds apart and we are talking, which is wonderful. I love the technology for that. So it's a huge book that was a labor of love in a way, and it took 8 years to produce because it's, again, everything that I try to work on, we produce it in 2 languages so that the Arabic is contained within the English language and it is preserved together. And because I read those 2 languages, I always need to have them correspond. So it was very important for me that every single page had the same information on it as you turned the page. As you know, and I don't know if your audience knows, but Arabic is read right to left and English is read left to right. So if you are reading it, if you read both languages and the words do not correspond, you end up with a headache and you will never finish the book. And with a book like this, that's about 1,000 pages, it's a tremendous task to be able to do it in both languages. It documented, it's the first documentation of dress in the United Arab Emirates. I come from Iraq, but I happen to grow up in the United Arab Emirates and to have experienced the life and style of dress and clothing within this area. And because the United Arab Emirates is a newly developing country, it required that the dress history of this country be preserved. And for me, it was a labor of love to give back to this country by documenting this information and publicly publishing the articles of clothing for prosperity for them. So this is one of the books that we produced, and there are a number of other books. I'm not going to go into them for the sake of I think if anyone is interested in the others, they can go to our website and have a look at them. And I will move on to the next slide to show another interesting, beautiful article of clothing. This one is from North Africa. And again, look at the image, the painting, the beautiful painting, and then look at the article of clothing itself. And you can see how it comes to life as you see it draped on a mannequin, and it shows, it helps one understand how these clothes were worn and how did these women experience wearing them. North Africa as a whole has a rich history, ethnicities, cultures, and Morocco in particular has a relationship, a very strong relationship with an article of clothing called the kaftan in particular, and it had played a significant global role in fashion and culture through that article of clothing. And I know you and I, we spoke about it, and we thought that we might do a whole session on the history of the kaftan. This particular one is very unique. It is called Qamis Mkhazzani. And Mkhazzani means it is of the old traditional style. It has not been affected by the development of the kaftan as it passed through time. This one dates to the 1920s, and it has a special design which they call tarz al-khanjar, which in Arabic translates to English. It means the embroidery that has a style of a khanjar, which is a dagger. If you remember, or if you have ever seen an Arab dagger, it has this pointed shape to it. And you see the pointed edges on the borders of the embroidery work. And that's where the name comes from. Interestingly, the person from whom we received this article wrote to me to say, my stepmother, Renee van der Leyden, passed away, and my father and her used to live in Amsterdam. And a long time ago, there was a clothing store called Reflections, although she used to travel a lot and always bought beautiful, expensive things in order to show them in films made in Amsterdam. Some were produced by her brother, Will van der Leyden, a famous movie director. So this piece came from Amsterdam. It was carried from Morocco to Amsterdam and lived with this family and was worn in a film and was used and loved by that person. And that person passed away for her son to then donate it and give it back to the Zay Initiative and come back to tell a story, not only of the dress, but also of the people who experienced it and wore it. And that's really captures my, my emotions one way or the other. Now, as far as the exhibitions and collaborations, The Zay Initiative is continually looking to partner with forward-thinking institutions, searching for ways to impact society positively, promoting the conservation and study of cultural legacy, aiming for a sustainable future, building peace, dispersing misconceptions, and illuminating pathways. Here we see examples that we participated in, whereby some of the articles of clothing were displayed. You see it in the United Arab Emirates, and I'm sure a lot of your audience have heard of a city called Dubai. Now it is one of the most famous cities in our time. And this in particular, there were a number of exhibitions that took place here in Dubai. In Dubai, we have a place called Dubai Design District. And the government of Dubai is trying to promote design and the sustainability of crafts and the education of designers and creating a hub for design and creativity within the city of Dubai. And this was launched in 2015, and we were invited to exhibit there to launch the project, which was a wonderful point of departure to be able to participate in something as wonderful as that. We speak also of, as I mentioned earlier, that the Arab world does not exist in a vacuum. It is composed of more than 20 countries, and it is cross-pollinated by influences of a multitude of ethnicities and religions woven within its culture. It also constantly shares traditions with neighboring as well as trading countries throughout time. Thus, one cannot speak of it without drawing parallels and contrasts with other cultures. This is a case in mind. This is traditional dress from southern Iran, which is the opposite area of what we call the Arab Gulf. It is the Persian side of the Gulf. And this is what they wear. The tribes and the people who live there are somehow connected to the tribes who live on this side. And they share culture, they share traditions, and they share a lot of their crafts as well. This is a young designer who is one of our very close friends, as I can say, in the Zay Initiative, who has helped us in finding these objects and going to different villages and small cities and collecting these articles of clothing from ladies, older ladies who has saved them as part of their torso. And she also helped dress in them and wear them in order to show us how it is done. She's so passionate. We are very, very lucky to have people that are working with us who are passionate, truly passionate about the subject, and who have participated in their time and effort, just like you, Cassidy. I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing to the Zay Initiative.
Oh, thank you. I mean, yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
On another, how can I say, just to continue this idea of collaboration and working with designers and so on and so forth, unique design speaks a timeless universal language that knows no boundaries or borders. The Zay Initiative looks to sustain traditional crafts by collaborating with designers and young talents. And here we have two examples. You see in the middle image, a whole troupe of performers. And this was the last celebration in UAE, which was the 48th National Day celebration pre-COVID. After COVID, we no longer gathered in these large crowds. So this was last year in 2019, the year before the last now. And we teamed up with, oddly enough, a young British designer who was awarded the task of creating the costumes for this performance. And the Zay Initiative worked for a period of 6 months together with this designer. She was inspired by a number of the pieces in our collection, and she worked and based her work on our collection, the historic part of it, and introduced or interpreted it into this, they created around 400 samples of these dresses, and luckily we at the Zay collection have 2 of them, one in the blue turquoise theme format, and the other one in the orange theme format. And also we worked with a UAE designer, artist, talented young lady, Amali Biljafla, who worked with us to produce presents and gifts that were made by craftswomen here in the UAE, but designed in a more cutting edge, let's say, modern style, to be presented by the UAE government to dignitaries and officials that come in and visit, and they would like to take something back with them to their country to remind them of the UAE. From this, we move to another thing, and I hope people are enjoying this, because tell me what you think. I mean,
it's very fascinating. It's all so fascinating, and I'm glad you turned back to the collection, because that's really obviously the heart of the Zay Initiative, is you have this basis of over 1,300 pieces from which you've done all these wonderful, collaborations around the world, really. And I think I'm glad you're highlighting the website, because it's such an incredible source of information, and you and your team have put so much work into making this a place, like I mentioned earlier, it's in Arabic and English. So you really can go here and learn, and I think you're going to take us through and show us just how diverse the website is in how you approach each and every one of these garments.
Personally, I believe our core strength stems in what we call the collection, which is our digital archive. So if you go to our website, you go to our collection, and we're going to show you a clip now to illustrate how easily this can work, and how user-friendly the end result is. I'm happy to report that I see now 1,350. Actually, we are now at 1,500 and some odd pieces, and we are growing all the time.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, the digital archive is another way where the Zay Initiative is pioneering the documentation and preservation of this Arab dress. And I'm going to take you to this one, and I hope I know how to work it, and let them.
Navigating to the Zay Initiative is very simple. Just type thezay.org. You will arrive at our homepage, from where you can explore. And to see our dress and adornment collection, click Collection. From here, scroll down to see the different articles. If you want to learn more, click View Details. You will need to create an account if you haven't already. But once you have logged in, the world of Arab dress awaits you. Every article includes detailed imagery of each piece. Sometimes it will include the photographs of those who once owned it or wore it. The information on the right of these images presents a brief introduction. Clicking on the image will enlarge it for more details. Others will include video clips with further explanations when possible. Underneath the images is an in-depth study of the article, including the tangible and the intangible. You will notice some words are in red. Point your mouse over them, and you can view the definition of that item. If you prefer to view in Arabic, click at the top right-hand corner. Here, you can navigate again in the same manner, where you will find all the information, as well as the pop-up glossary terms in Arabic. If you want to go into more detail, where possible, we include suggestions of additional reading material, including links to our blog and other websites. We are working very hard on making our full and constantly growing collection of over 1,350 pieces available online for everyone to explore.
I hope this illustrates the seriousness and intensive work that's what they call now back-end work here. Now it's a new vocab that I have learned. The behind-the-scene work that we are putting into this project. As we ground our work academically, we understand we must look at earlier bodies of work and try to develop them further to suit the needs of our time. And a case in point is looking at Reinhard Dozy, a Dutch scholar from a French origin, who in 1845 created the first and only dictionary of terms for vestments in the Arab world. Imagine, nobody has developed it since then. This is we find this as our point of departure as we work to create a digital glossary of Arabic terms that flows with today's requirements and allows people to connect globally. You might ask me, how do we collect these articles of clothing and adornment? And I would like to just illustrate or introduce to the audience how this collection came about. The core of the collection, especially that relates to the UAE, happened to be collected organically through my experiences and my lifetime. Once we established the Zay Initiative, and thankfully, due to the social media outreach, we have been attracting the attention of generous individuals, eager to preserve the memory of their loved ones, their mother, their grandmother, their father, their uncle. Conscious individuals dispersed through diaspora, longing to their homeland, those who are scattered all around the world, but still long for a memory of their homeland. Most of all, we have non-Arabs who are eager to record their experiences in the Arab world. These are people who came and lived and practiced life within the Arab countries. And they took back with them at the time pieces of memorabilia. And now they are returning them back to us with the story, like the one that I illustrated to you at the beginning. And they want to include it and give it back to this bank of shared culture. Here we have two examples. They are from Bahrain, and they date back to 1982. They were part of a torso, wedding torso of Linda McConnell, a wonderful friend of mine. She has helped me through my PhD degree and continues to assist us with the Zay Initiative. These are typical examples of wedding dresses made in Bahrain. And if you see, they resemble very much the Hashmi of Iraq, but in Bahrain, they call it thob nashal. And in the image, which was portrayed in Vogue Vogue Arabia, just a few months ago, is a princess from Saudi Arabia wearing a similar dress, also called thob nashal, but this is the Saudi version. And you see that they are all very similar, but yet they are unique. They might differ in the style of the neck or the embroidery or the motifs that are placed on the dress itself and how they are placed or where they are placed. The general reason why these are very much similar is because nowadays the center for production of these articles of clothing, in earlier times, as I said, they were Iraq, which is Najaf, Basra, these areas of Iraq, and then it was India. So all of these were manufactured in India and for the export market to the Gulf and Arab region. And now we have Bahrain as a major center for the thob nashal, where most of them are made by hand till today.
And I was going to say, you can't necessarily tell, but are those all hand embroidered too? All of that decoration? It's an incredible amount of work. And on the website, that's what's so wonderful about the website is you can go in and see the details. You've done such a wonderful job. It's not just one image, it's the front, it's the back, it's detailed shots, so that you really can tell, get a feel for what went into the making of these garments.
Yes, I think it's a wonderful way of getting to know the Arab culture. And also it's a way for those who visit and pass by to understand it when they go back and understand why these women are wearing this and how they are wearing it. By the way, one of the most important misconceptions that this dispels is that those Arab women are not dressed in black, as everybody thinks. Look at how colorful their clothing is, how elaborate, how intensive the work is, how valuable these pieces of clothing are. They cost quite a lot of money to acquire and many hours to make and to produce.
And that brings up a really good point too, because, and you'll talk about it later, I think too, but one of the the inevitable byproducts of what you do is kind of challenging these myths and stereotypes of Arab women. And you're doing it with just this beautiful celebratory way.
Very true. I think it is a beautiful medium that we all enjoy and can understand. You don't require a book to understand how beautiful these pieces are. So it's a beautiful way to connect between cultures, to create a cultural bridge from which we can understand each other and understand that knowledge can go back and forth. It does go back and forth throughout time. And people get influenced. And as we go down and we get to the end of our presentation, you will see how it is interpreted into our Western culture and Western design forms. Now, another way to learn more about the Arab culture is through our blog, and experts in their field looking to expand the world's knowledge, as well as those starting out on their learning journey. We all share the love of rare handmade articles that tell the story of our times. We have at the moment two amazing and very hardworking specialists. We have Ansi and Sigrid, both of them, who participate and with us, helping us to pollinate our blog on a monthly basis. We hope to encourage others to participate and send us their entries to add to this growing body of work. So this is another way where we can interact, and we hope that people who are listening to us today, who have anything written about the subject matter, about something related to the Arab world, please, I encourage you to send it over, and these wonderful women will put it into a blog format. They will do an interview. They will highlight certain aspects and give a little more in-depth knowledge about certain articles or stories or events that take place.
And storytelling, as is exhibited by the blog, is so key to what you do, and you do it in such captivating and beautiful ways. And one of the ways is through these videos, which we're about to see right here, which I already talked about it earlier, but these videos really show us how these clothes are to be valued not just for their cultural heritage and for their material value, but also for their cultural value and their symbolic value, and for because they're emblematic of the women, or in this case, the girls who wore them.
Very true. I'm going to play this, and I hope I know.
The Zay Initiative presents the Thob Kandora Miazza, made in 2011. This dress was spotted by Dr. Reem El Mutwalli in this rare photo taken when the UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan was visited by his nephew and a group of his nieces as they paid their respects during Eid celebrations in 2011. Worn by Sheikh Hamda bint Hazza bin Tahnoon bin Muhammad Al Nahyan, age 7 then, it was later donated by her mother, Sheikh Moza bint Muhammad bin Khalid Al Nahyan, to the Zay collection. This type of combined overgarment and tunic Thobe Kandora, evolved post-1990s as a 2-in-1 special occasion dress. This example is made from panels miyazza. Traditionally, the paneling evolved out of frugality, when garments were made from several pieces of expensive leftover fabrics. Over time, it came to be recognized as a style in itself called miyazza, from the Arabic word mjazza, which means paneled. This garment is machine embroidered in gold metallic thread zari with arabesque motifs. The embroidery accentuates the neckline's central axis and paneling joints, as well as sleeve cuffs of the inner tunic. The embroidery is then further accentuated with royal purple, grass green, and deep red Swarovski crystal iron-ons, fusus. The Zay Initiative, an ode to the past and not to the future, a collection of Arab dress and adornment, celebrating human narrative.
As you see, we have many of these videos that we are creating, video clips. And by the way, even those video clips, we're doing them in English, so people can listen to them, choose the language in which they want to listen to them in order to learn about certain articles of clothing. We aim to, if we can, do this for every single article, but that's quite a dream. And I don't know when we can reach that. Now, Cassidy, we are also committed to reaching out to the community and empowering some of those suffering through the present global circumstances. This is why we launched a research scholarship program, and we hope that we motivate those who can help to sponsor this project through their generous donations, while we encourage those who need work to apply to the program and benefit from this experience. This is another example of a dress that we have from Siwa. Siwa is an oasis in Egypt, and this is a wedding dress. The origin of the Siwi piece, which is called Nashra, is from Sheila Pine, and she is a well-known collector who had passed away, and we managed to purchase this piece from one of our creative advisors, Carrie Taylor Auction. And speaking of advisors, I'm happy, or we are blessed at the Zay Initiative with the support shown to us by our creative advisors. These are formidable women who have spent most of their adult life championing the values that we are all committed to. And we are proud to include them among our Zay family. Many of these have joined our webinar. Some of them are coming in the coming few months. And each one of them specializes in one field of Arab dress and Arab culture.
And we've had some questions about the upcoming webinar, which obviously this is a webinar. It's the first of 2021, but you have so many amazing guests coming up for the year. But Dr. Reem, before you do, you want to try to stop and start your video again because you're frozen.
Oh, how do I do that?
If you just go to the bottom left and stop it and then click it back on, it should hopefully reboot.
How is it now?
Now try to start your video again. If you go to the bottom left, there's a bar that says mute, stop video participants. Should be able to click it back on. And while she does that, I want to encourage the audience to type in any questions you might have for the end. We're nearing the end of the talk. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type those into the Q&A and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. There you are. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to take us back maybe a few. Is it still moving in your? Yeah.
Yeah, just go back to the webinar. There you are.
So sorry about this. I don't know why it happened. You spoke about the webinars, and yes, the webinars have been really wonderful because we have successfully conducted 3 series, and we are today starting our 4th. The discussions with field experts on the art of Arab dress has introduced this subject or genre to so many people. I hope it has helped dispel misconceptions as well as entertain and open a window to the Arab culture. I love this slide before I move on is because it's a wonderful example of how Arab culture is so diverse. This is called an izar. Izar was the predecessor of the abaya, and it is a public dress form that women wore in the Arab world. And we have one from Syria, which is the purple one, and it dates back to 1870s. This is one of the oldest pieces we've got in the collection. And you see another 2 similar ones. And the one in the middle was worn by a Jewish Iraqi woman, and the one on the far right, would be worn by a Muslim Iraqi woman. So you can see that in one culture and with the diversity of religions that are there, they share the same background, traditions. They might vary in color, they might vary in style, but still they coexisted together and sort of dressed out in the same format. Which is what's unique about the Arab world. And again, we cannot discuss the Arab world without discussing the Islamic legacy. The Ottomans in Turkey, the Mughals in India, they all have had a continued and profound influence on the textile garment industry in the Arab world. This is an Ottoman example of dress which we have, and you can see how beautifully it is illustrated in the painting in the same page, on the same page. We come to the intercultural dialogue, and I wanted to speak about the Instagram feed and social media. Contrary to many, the Instagram has been a blessing to the Zay Initiative. It connected us to a global audience in real time and despite COVID. It allowed a wonderful channel to discuss and to carry a dialogue, and it connected us with like-minded people like yourself who became close friends. So it was a wonderful experience for us. And
you have 2 accounts, right? Because there's the Sultani UAE account, and then there's the Zay account, both which have incredible imagery and speak to the collection on a daily basis.
Sultani one is older than the Zay Initiative one because it accompanied the production of the Sultani book, which spoke about UAE dress, and therefore it has a larger audience following. But the Zay, it's still new and it's growing very fast, which is very wonderful to see. Now, men compose the other half of our society, and I'm happy to say that than saying it the other way around. And we at the Zay Initiative, we believe their presence within our work is imperative. We collect women and men's attire, and we document them equally. And in this in particular one is a piece that was worn by Sir Laurence Olivier. It's the Mahdi Jubba, and it is, he wore it for the Khartoum film that was produced in 1966. And we come to funding. It is our main obstacle. And here is a wonderful way to help the Zay Initiative and add to our personal, your personal fine art collection at the same time. So we teamed up, and we always team up with a number of young up-and-coming photographers, painters, artists. They produce series of limited edition products that we have on our website that people can purchase By doing so, they are helping us disperse the work of these young, talented people and give back to the Zay Initiative to help us with our work and with our legacy. The collection itself, as I said, it is a growing collection, and this is a wonderful example that shows that. On the left side, you see a wedding dress or a wedding attire that is worn by a Tunisian bride. And on the right side, you see one article of clothing from that attire. This one dates to the 1920s. And in the middle, you see how the dress or the whole outfit is composed, which is wonderful. And it helps bring it to life again, as I said. And it shows that the collection is not by no means complete. It's a work in progress. And the only way it can grow and progress is by having individuals participate and send articles of clothing so that we can have their stories to go with it. Now, Yemen. Yemen is a sore topic. Yemen is all about war, conflict, and diaspora. Sadly, these are all themes that intersect with Arab culture. This is we at the Zay Initiative have a wonderful collection of over 68 pieces from Yemen. We managed to acquire, to rescue them in a way, and to save them for history, for prosperity. And this is one of these objects, or the whole outfit actually is part of it. And you see it in the image displayed as to how it is worn. And it shows the work and craftsmanship, especially the silver craftsmanship of the Jewish community in Yemen, who are known for their expertise in this kind of work and production. But let us end on a positive note and illustrate women empowerment. The UAE is not only leading the way in the way they are managing the COVID testing and vaccination, but also they are leading in opening the path to its female members to participate in civic and governing positions. We at the Zay Initiative, especially since we are coming to the first Expo 2020 to take place in an Arab country, have worked on an exhibition, and we call it Draped in Heritage, whereby we identified 20 trailblazing women from all walks of life. This is a marine biologist, and what we did is we teamed it up with articles of clothing from our collection. So her headpiece comes from a woman, her dress comes from an outer cloak comes from another, her underclothing is coming from another. Each one of those tells the story of the woman that wore it before her. And it is now coming in and being worn by a young, aspiring woman. And it is grounding her in her culture, in her identity, and allowing her to shine and to go forward. And this is all what the Zay Initiative is all about. And here's another young lady. She is a jewelry designer. And this is us filming her, taking her portrait out in the market in Dubai, in the gold market, which is very famous to many visitors of Dubai. But on a upbeat, it shows you how these women are really participating in developing their country, and how Arab women are really not those women that you think about them covered up and suppressed, dare I say.
Dr. Reem, thank you so much for this wonderful, I mean, really, it's just a glimpse at what you do. There's just so much more. You've kind of scratched the surface. And people can head, of course, to thezay.org, follow you on the Zay, at the Zay on Instagram, and then, of course, follow your webinar series to continue to learn more about the wonderful work that yourself and your team are doing. So how can our audience get involved in your organization?
Here we've outlined it here, and people can go through these 9 steps and choose whatever they'd like to do to help us and be part of it. I really think that this work cannot be accomplished by one person. I have to thank my team who are behind the, the lines, and they work, they give a lot of their time for hardly anything, because we are a non-profit organization and we are different individuals who are trying to produce some kind of work that can help humanity. I wanted to talk about this article rather than talk about how people can help us. They can read, I think, and help us and develop. But I thought it was a wonderful slide to end with, because as you see, when people in the West look at us and think maybe, probably, I don't know, I'm just assuming, what have I got to do with the Arab world? What do they? Why do I need them? What do I want from them? But I'm trying to say that we as humans are always dependent on one another, and we cannot live without one another. This is an article of clothing that was worn by a very famous American star, Barbra Streisand. She wore it for the movie A Star is Born in 1976. And then she wore it again in 1977 for the Grammy Awards. But not many people would know that she is wearing a dress that came from Asyut. This is an Asyuti shawl that was made in a city, a very remote village in southern Egypt. They are famous for doing this. It is made by silver thread or silver straw. It's very, very heavy. And it was made in the 1910s, 1920s, and became very popular because people started to see that area when the Tutankhamun tomb was discovered there. And the whole world got noticed of the space and the area. And what's wonderful here, as I was telling you, is that whoever designed this dress, which is a very Western style of dress, nothing to do with the Arab style of dress, they were very conscious of the importance and the value of the piece. And if you look at the small insert, you will see that it's actually still is a shawl. They didn't cut it, they didn't play with it. They just draped it and added two barrettes or two small pieces, ribbons, to hang the dress on this star, which is a wonderful thing to see how they interpreted this very traditional form of clothing or attire into something that is very modern and contemporary. And I chose to wear a dress by Chanel, and it is also made of the exact same work, the silver straw, and it is by a French couturier, nothing to do with the Arabs, but still influenced by them. And that's what I wanted to have come across to your audience, that we are all interconnected.
And I think you've, like I've said, you've shown that wonderfully, and people are just going to continue to learn more. Now we can turn to our Q&As, and this slide that you have here is actually perfect. Somebody was inquiring about what are some of the upcoming webinars in the series. If you want to speak to those quickly.
Yes, our following webinar is with Melissa Levington, and she's a curator, and she worked with the Queen in Asia. Her Majesty, the Queen...
Sirikit of Thailand.
Thailand, it's too far away for me to read. And Her Majesty has a huge collection of European dress. And she worked with a lot of European designers to create her wardrobe. And it's interesting, I thought, that we would see someone from the Muslim world wearing very European clothing and making or creating a museum out of that. And we hope that Melissa will take us through that journey to help us understand how she worked with her, what was her experience by being there, and going through the whole process of curating this whole exhibition. And we are following it with an amazing woman. She is one of my idols, Widat Qawar. Widat Qawar has the largest collection of Palestinian dress. And she has Tiraz, which is a museum in her own home. that speaks to the preservation and conservation of Palestinian heritage. And she's going to walk us through her life journey and how she collected and what are the most important pieces in her collection. I met, I call her Khala or Sitwidat because she's an esteemed lady. And we met a long, long time ago, and she left a print on me. And I think she's one of the people who has always inspired me to continue the work that I am doing in this field in particular. And then we have another American lady. Oh, and this one is really interesting because she's one of the prominent women who worked on the Egyptian dress, but from a clothing of, or a wardrobe for a queen, we will go to the wardrobe of a peasant. And Dr. Andrea Rue, who is the wife of the ex-American ambassador to the UAE, came and lived in the UAE. And she also at the time was stationed with her husband in Egypt and lived there. And she wrote this book in the 1987. And when I went back and we connected, and she told me, and she reminded me of the time we met, I felt I was getting really old. But it will be wonderful to hear her speak about peasant clothing in Egypt and how that evolved and how it looked like and what are the symbols behind what they were wearing at the time and how they wore it. So we have a sort of a nice layers of different types of clothing from the Arab world to introduce it to the public. And I really welcome you all to come and join us.
And it's every 2 weeks, right? Every other Tuesday, and you can join the newsletter on the zay.org to get updates on upcoming webinars and to remind you to register.
Exactly.
So there's a couple other questions about the collection. Somebody asked how they can donate items to the collection. I know you're always looking for donations. So let's start there. And oh, and then there was another question about, are you collecting contemporary pieces?
Yes, we would collect contemporary pieces if they have a story behind them, because the most important element of these items is that they carry a story. They carry the memory of a certain person or a situation or a time or a special occasion that can add to the tapestry of the Arab life now and how it's evolving and how it is changing. That's as far as the collection is concerned. Now, as far as how do you donate, it's very, very, very simple. You just have to write to us, scan the barcode here on the slide, and it will take you to our website. It will prompt you to subscribe to our newsletter, and it will show you who you need to connect with and how. And you just have to write to us and say, I have this piece, write the story about the piece, tell us about who owned it, why it means so much to you, why do you want to put it in? Give us all the contextual information that we can add to that piece in order for us to include it. And we will promise you we'll have it on eventually into the digital archive, and it will always be there for your children and grandchildren and generations to come to remember and to read what you have written.
And then we have another question here that is asking about, at the start of the program, you mentioned a connection between the Japanese kimono and a garment of Arab dress. Can you repeat the name of that garment? And is that connection something you can explore further on the Zay?
Definitely. Actually, it's wonderful because one of our creative advisors, Dr. Michelle Bambling, who's an American, and who had studied the Japanese culture and Japanese dress. And she had lived here in the UAE for a period of time. And so we worked together on a number of projects, and she is part of our creative advisory board. She is very much involved in this. And as we looked into these dresses, and had many dialogues about them in the UAE and in the Gulf. If you look at the dress, the thobe, which is what we saw in Iraq called a hashmi, a thobe nashal in in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and all these areas. And we have the same thobe as it is seen in Siwa, which is in Egypt. So you have it in all these Arab countries, but it is translated in a different format depending on the geographical location. Now, there are similarities that we discovered between the general design of a kimono and the basic outlines of the kimono, as well and the Arab thobe as an overgarment. That is worn by many of the women. Now, the basic shape, there are similarities, but when it comes to draping as well as tailoring it, they start to deviate and become different. Another similarity that is between them is the way they are decorated. The thobe, as you saw, is very heavily decorated with silver thread and straw, or silver gilded straw and thread. And the same thing happens. We see similar style of decorative adornment placed on a kimono, as is the case with the Arab thobe. So these are very generally the elements of similarities. But we are working on producing some sort of an exhibit, as well as some sort of study to illustrate all of that.
And thobe is spelled T-H-A-U-B or W-B?
WB. We are writing it with a THAWB. Now, this is why it is very important that we have this glossary, because thobe in the UAE, it's pronounced thobe. In Palestine, they call it tobe. In Sudan, they call it tobe. In Iraq, they call it thobe. So it varies in the way it is pronounced and it is written from one area to the other, as well as in the design format and overall structure in a way. And it has similarities. As I said, in the Arab world, you have so many similarities and so many diversions. And it is this juxtaposition of all of these that creates this Arab world. And that's why it was important to create a glossary to identify and record these variances as well as similarities.
Absolutely. And I will say, you can't just Google this either. If you Google this, you're not going to find these nuances that you go into. I've tried it. You have to go to the Zay, really, because you're pioneering this sort of dialogue and documentation. Like you said, the last person who did this was in 1845. So really, really important work. I think we have time for a couple more questions, if that's okay with you, Dr. Reem. Someone was inquiring if you have access to traditional Lebanese clothing for sources about Lebanese dress, and they found it hard to find anything about them. If there's any sources you recommend, and do you have those examples in the collection?
This is a very good question, actually. It's very, very difficult to find examples of traditional Lebanese dress. But having said that, we have to remember that the Levant, which is the greater Syria, which is composed of the whole region from Mosul in Iraq all the way to the Sinai Desert, that whole crescent, are very intertwined in tradition and culture. And they are very much influenced by the surrounding area and the Silk Route that took place. And remember, Damascus for many, many, many years was the center of textile production. This is where the word Damas came from. Muslin came from Mosul because it was produced there, and so on and so forth. So these were all centers of production, and they were all very close in their traditional dress and attire. So we've got some pieces from Syria, which is wonderful. We've got some pieces from Palestine, which is also wonderful. And we are trying desperately to obtain pieces from Lebanon. So if the person who asked has any pieces, please send them our way.
And then there's a couple more questions here. Although the Arab world is dominantly Muslim, there are many religious minorities, and you addressed a couple of them throughout your talk. How does their choice of clothing differ from the Muslims, and how did those differences contribute to the dress of the Arab world? And you talked about that a little bit in the slide with the webinar and the different versions of the kind of what is the same garment.
Yes, I mean, I believe that diversity enriches us. And I believe that these people who lived on this land for thousands of years, they must have interacted and influenced each other. And any form of interaction, I think, is good, is healthy. It produces creativity. It produces nuances that one can learn from and work with. In general, the dress format does not really vary that much. As you saw in the example that I showed you, they were all wearing an izar. They might differ maybe in color. So for example, we know that yellow and blue and white colors and light colors were mainly, and yellow especially, was worn by Jewish women. Darker, more somber colors such as maroon, burgundy, dark purple were used by Muslim women. This is how they could tell between different religions. We know that there are certain motifs, elements in embroidery that can differentiate one area from the other, not necessarily one religion from the other, but for example, especially when it comes to Palestinian dress, there is one kind of embroidery stitch that identifies a specific area in Palestine and a specific village and is known by it. And we have not the Zay Initiative, but people like Widat Qawar and others have worked on a whole map of the region that identifies each stitch to the village and the tribe that it came from.
And one, I think, probably final question, and I think it's a really interesting one because this is a conversation we've been having a lot, especially in the United States over the last year, is someone wrote, throughout fashion history, the styles and techniques of Arab clothing have come in and out of Western fashion. Can you speak about issues of cultural appropriation by the Western fashion industry from the perspective of Arab culture? You know, we've been having this talk a lot, and appropriation versus appreciation. You're wearing a Chanel garment that is inspired by Egyptian craft. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
You know, I think the basis of all of this is to have respect to other cultures and to understand these cultures. Now, this is why, you know, this is the core element of having the Zay Initiative. If you have a way to introduce these cultures and educate people about these cultures, whoever is inspired by them can understand the nuances that are in these cultures and understand their sensitivities and particularities and be vigilant of them. And I think a lot of the international brands nowadays, because the Arab and the Muslim consumers are now influencing very heavily the textile or fashion industry through this what is being called now modest fashion. I think it's very easy to misinterpret certain elements and raise these frictions that take place. Hopefully, through what we are doing, it will help people. I mean, there is a source or a reference or somewhere that people can go and ask these questions and have a dialogue and understand, just like this young designer from England who came to us when she wanted to work on the clothing that was produced for this event in the Abu Dhabi in 2019. We worked with her for 6 months in order to avoid such misunderstandings, to ensure that what she's producing is diverse, is fashionable, is trendy, but at the same time, it does not it does not affect or hurt anyone's feelings. I don't know if I addressed this properly for you.
No, I think you did. Yeah, I think you addressed that there's a way to do it respectfully. There's a way to appreciate without appropriating. And obviously your organization, and you've had some wonderful webinars on these topics too that I highly encourage everyone to check out. So thank you so much, Dr. Reem. Emma, I see you're back.
I'm back. Hello. So much. I think you could all keep going. The questions are still coming in. Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you, Dr. Reem. Just as ever, amazing, enlightening. Even though I work on the Zay Initiative, a lot of the time, most of the time, I still am always so fascinated. And Cassidy, I think you brought out so much from us and made us re-inspired by it. So that's just fantastic. Everyone, thank you so much for your questions. Just incredible. I think we should get Cassidy back in a few months and do a repeat session and expand some more and go into some other topics. Everyone, you've suggested some fantastic topics for us to cover over the next few webinars. If anyone does have any great ideas, please feel free to drop me an email, emma@thezay.org, and I'll do my best over the year with Kat, who works very hard behind the scenes to fit those in and schedule them within the year. I know a lot of talk for another jury talk, so we'll try and put that in.